Okay, so we'll just start off with a few slides today, just introducing a bit about the problem we're trying to solve and also how QuizCom addresses this in a number of different apps, which I'm going to show you today. The majority of the webinar is going to be live demos because I always find that that's the best way to show you and explain to you how QuizCom solves those problems. So what's the problem here? Well, firstly, there's a number of challenges around how users can quickly and easily edit and update content within SharePoint. And I've called out a few examples here. So actually, it's quite difficult nowadays to bulk edit lists of data, easily copy and paste information from our spreadsheets, work across different browsers to bulk edit that data. We ultimately miss the Datasheet view, which we used to have in SharePoint. If we're authoring pages, whether that's for our team site or our intranet, it's not that easy to actually just take a Word document or a PDF and copy all of the content to create pages. So quickly transform maybe quite static, difficult to navigate documents into rich pages in, like I say, an intranet, maybe a knowledge base. End users can get really frustrated by these sort of things. They expect it to work easier than this. They're used to that experience in personal applications they work with. And things just don't work in SharePoint around editing content, bulk editing content in the way users expect. So I'm going to show you 4 apps today which help that. The first is the Datasheet View app. So actually, those of you who used older versions of SharePoint will remember the Datasheet View app. It was the way in a list we could switch to Datasheet View and we could easily copy and paste data from our spreadsheets, click a row, click a column and easily drag that down, export data to Excel easily. And that's now been replaced by Microsoft with the quick edit functionality, which is very restrictive, especially if you step outside Microsoft browsers. I primarily don't use Microsoft browsers myself. I prefer to use Chrome, and I often find I have to revert to those browsers to do certain bulk transactions, and even then I find the quick edit experience slow and unreliable. QuizCom have brought back the Datasheet View as part of their Datasheet View app, so we can easily do and work with that. So I'm going to show you that, also show how that works across browsers into browsers like Chrome. We'll also have a look at Paste Plus, so how we can easily take content and copy and paste that into our pages, and how that delivers us a richer experience than what you receive using the native paste experience. Images are properly stored, it's a single control rather than ending up with many different web parts. If any of you have used the native experiences, you'll end up either with missing images which don't paste successfully, or it's scattering across multiple different web parts. And this is obviously using the modern SharePoint pages. So we'll have a little look at that. We'll have a look at SharePoint Find and Replace. So this is actually a desktop app, and it's specifically targeted at when we look at migrating content. It could be that we're moving from an older version of SharePoint to SharePoint 2019, or we're moving from SharePoint on premises up into the cloud. Equally, we could be moving from a non-Microsoft web platform, a basic intranet, up into a modern SharePoint site. But a number of our documents and pages include hard-coded links. Maybe we've done work in SharePoint Designer in the past, so there's hard-coded links. Maybe our documents link to other documents using links. So it's actually a really important part of a migration project, whether that's a small-scale project or something grander. And this is something many migration tools miss, and so again leads to frustration. So I'll show you how very quickly we can scan across a number of documents in our SharePoint environment and find links and easily report and change those. And finally, we'll have a look at the URL file picker. So actually how we can get a better experience working with our URL hyperlink columns within our SharePoint lists. The experience, instead of having to go and find our link elsewhere in SharePoint or OneDrive and actually having to copy that link and then come back to our SharePoint page and paste that link in, actually that full browsing experience within a SharePoint list to browse and select appropriate hyperlinks. And although it's not the topic of this webinar, we'll also briefly touch on KWIZ Conforms and the fact that the URL file picker is part of KWIZ Conforms. So we can go from a very vanilla SharePoint list form to a richer modern form experience with things like layouts, interdependent lookups, multiple repeating rows, and also the URL file picker experience. So let's move on to those demos. So first of all, I'm in a SharePoint list here. You can see that in this case, I'm starting in Edge just to show you, but we'll move across to another browser in a second. And we've obviously got that standard sort of grid view quick edit, which you get within lists now, but we know some of its limitations. It's not very reliable across browsers. It's not easy to drag and drop columns down. It's not easy to copy and paste data from Excel. It can actually take a very long time to copy data across. So what have we got? We've got the Datasheet view. And if I click on that, we're in that Datasheet view experience, which we've seen before and we know and we're familiar with. And it's got all of the advantages which that Datasheet view came with. It's essentially Excel inside of a SharePoint list. So all of those proper controls which we want. That rich menu here to copy, paste, report and export data how we want to. Obviously, we can go in here and add rows. We can filter on rows as well. We can also take data and easily copy it in. Before I do that though, I'm just going to show you the fact that I can do that in any browser. So I'm in Chrome now. And if I click on Datasheet View again, exactly that same experience. So whatever browser you prefer to work in, you can quickly work with data. Let's show you that in action. So I've got a little Excel spreadsheet here, and it's got some data I want to bring into my list. Now, instead of having to choose a specific browser and any sort of performance type issues with the native grid view, I can just copy this data from my Excel spreadsheet, return to my Datasheet view, and I can just paste that in. Look at that, that's in there instantly. It's not taking me ages for that data to paste in. And what's more, I've got that ability to just drag down just like that, just like we're used to in Excel. So it's very quick, very easy. We've seen that sort of and talked about these filtering, sorts experiences. Again, all of the experiences which we expect to see inside of Excel is available in that Datasheet view. So something which will work for all users across their browsers and allow people to edit and work with data. It's something which is familiar to people who have used SharePoint in the past, but it's also the sort of things which people will expect coming to SharePoint new. They won't get frustrated with that grid view interface. So that's our Datasheet View app. While I'm in this list, I'm actually going to show you the URL file picker. Now, this is part of KWIZ Conforms. Like I say, this isn't a webinar about KWIZ Conforms. We've done previous webinars talking about how we can deliver rich modern forms, but we'll see a little bit of that as I go in and look at these items. Now, they obviously work with new items or existing items. So I'm just going to go ahead and edit one of these items. And you'll notice in a second that this is going to load a form. It looks like modern SharePoint. None of the data is going outside of your tenant. This is not an app which manages data externally. It's enhancing that native experience. And you can see we've got things like drop-down controls. We can support advanced capabilities like selecting one column and then presenting a restricted list of other columns, both looking up from various lists. We've done an advanced layout here. So we've got title across a single column and then split the category and cost across multiple columns. We could lay our form out across multiple tabs. We can put parent and child data in the form. We can also display images and many other capabilities, as well as putting rules on what data is displayed at certain states of a form. But the main thing I wanted to show you today is the URL file picker. So you can see here that I've got a hyperlink column. Now in the native experience, I would just have to go and find my URL. It might be that I know it, but if I'm linking to a file, I'm going to have to go and find the URL for that file. Actually, not that easy in the modern experience. I want to link to a page. I want to link to a picture, an asset, whatever it might be. If you know your way around SharePoint, you're just used to it. You're used to some of those frustrating things. But actually for an end user, they're like, well, why can't I just browse for content? I can do that in normal life. I can do that in some areas of SharePoint. I can do that in the modern page experience. Why can't I do that in the list experience? Well, actually, we can, thanks to QuizCom. So it will show me recent content here, which I can browse and find. I can do the web search powered by Bing. I can look at OneDrive and see my files from OneDrive. Maybe I want to link to a specific resource in OneDrive. I can paste a URL. Or alternatively, I can look at the content within my specific SharePoint site. So maybe I want to browse my site assets and find a specific image. I can look at this in different views, so maybe find what I'm really looking for. So maybe I want to link to a picture related to this specific piece of equipment. Alternatively, maybe I want a document. So maybe I want to link to a specific document. Let's link to that in this case. So I want to link to that technical manual. And this is then going to pull through both the URL and the friendly name for my link. And I can go ahead and save that. And that will just to create regular links. This is just enhancing the ability to interface with a native column inside of SharePoint. So there you go. I've now got a link directly to my document, and I can easily navigate to open and work with that document. But the experience to find that piece of content, link to that piece of content, although I was talking for a little bit around it, you can do in seconds again, rather than having to go and find that piece of content, understand the link, and copy and paste it correctly. And you might well have not done that correctly. Okay, so we're just going to step away from the browser for a second, and I'm going to come to the Find and Replace app. So this is a desktop app, and we can use it to find various URLs and correct them. So essentially handle our broken links. So very important as part of any migration of content within SharePoint. It might even be between two SharePoint sites in the same tenant or servers. Like I said, it might be between different SharePoint environments. It might be coming from a completely unconnected environment. Like I recently helped a customer move away from a classic basic HTML style intranet across to SharePoint, and there were many broken links and old pages as part of that. So before I actually take a look at the app itself, we'll just have a look at some of our documents. So inside my documents, I've got a couple of documents here. I've got some frequently asked questions, and I've got that technical manual which I referenced previously. And I think this is just opening one of the QuizCom documents, which I've deliberately put some slightly incorrect links in so we can see them. And hopefully in here we'll find that there are some links to other information, and these reference specific external links. It's a fairly big document, so I have to give it a second or two to load. Yeah, there you go. So for example, I've got a link here to something called intranet. So maybe I'm referencing another document here. And it doesn't have to be the full URL. It could be a friendly name for that URL, which then just has the link included in it. So that's the sort of thing I'm trying to address. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a number of tokens, a bit like we would do when we were doing a find and replace in Excel. I'm entering what I'm looking for, in this case, intranet, and I'm replacing it with the name of my SharePoint site. Now, it might not be quite as simple as that. I might be just looking for a specific phrase, might be just trying to remove certain characters. There might be all sorts of scenarios, and it's got various scenarios also to handle things like encoding of links as well, which might need to be adjusted. So I've got a very simple search I'm doing. Also note here we can import and export them. So if you need to prepare these in advance, then you can do as well. I'm now going to say, where am I searching? So I might need to search across multiple SharePoint sites. For simplicity of the webinar and speed today, I'm just going to look at a single site, and I've already signed into that. So I can go ahead and just check my credentials are fine. They are. Then I'm presented with a number of options in terms of what I'm looking to do. First things, I can either decide to just do a find and report. So a bit like if in Excel we were doing just a find to find the things, or I can do the find and replace. Now that's obviously a little bit more powerful, and we may or may not want to do that at this stage. I'm going to just stick with discovery. We can then choose various settings which we might want to change. So there's some interesting ones here. I could change the site title, description and logo, or navigation, master page, web part layouts. These are quite powerful settings. There's reasons why we might want to do them, potentially if we're moving branding between environments, but equally we have to be careful not to break something in our environment. Also, we can do things like list item properties, document properties, web part properties. So maybe there might be some hard-coded properties in certain web parts you've got. We can also define where we want our log file to be. So I'm just going to save that in this folder, and this will be where my report is outputted to, which we'll have a look at once we've run this. We can define whether we want to include text in various documents. We can see a number of the formats which are supported. And then we can define whether we want to restrict to certain lists and libraries or include all of them. And it might be easier to just include some or to skip some. Now, I'm only going to look at my documents library, because in this scenario I'm going through, that's the only library I'm interested in looking at. It might be some of the standard system libraries which contain various assets and system files. It's not appropriate. There's nothing, there's nothing you need to change there, and scanning through them would be unnecessary and might actually pose a risk. So lots of different options to consider here. So as I say, I'm just running the discovery report here. So this is going to go ahead and very quickly it's going to scan and look for the tokens which I've specified. And you can see that it's already found a couple of tokens within my file, and as it's processed my other document, it's then going to give me an outputted report, which I can go and look at. So in total, it's found me three tokens to change. So I'm going to go ahead and just open that log location. And it's going to give me two reports. It's going to give me one, which is the config, which is the configuration of what I ran. And secondly, it's going to give me a log file telling me where and what it did and the locations of what it found. So it can see here that it's found in a specific document. Frequently asked questions, it's found a token, and it's also found a couple of those within the technical manual. So I can then choose to potentially go and assign those to people to do, or alternatively, I could then now run the replace directly within the app and make those changes. So really useful for many scenarios, but I think two key ones as part or of a component of a larger scale migration where we're maybe using a migration tool, but we are not able to handle those links, or for various ad hoc processes to deal with small scale content migrations, maybe by a team, moving from an old intranet platform, and we need to address some of those hard-coded and broken links and make the experience work for users again. We don't want users to be frustrated when they go into a document and find that links to other resources don't work. Okay, so let's finally today look at the last of the demos we're going to do. And that's for the Paste Plus app. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and create a new page. Now I'm doing this in a team site. This would equally work well in a communication site. We're creating a modern SharePoint page. And actually we've got some content already. So we'll just create a blank page. And we've got some content already. It's stored within a document. We've got some information and we just literally want to copy and paste. It's the sort of thing users expect to be able to do. Let me just make that just a title area so we can see a bit better what we're trying to achieve here. And I've got a text control here, and I just want to paste into that control information from my document. So let's go and find that document first of all. I'll tell you what, let's take that technical manual which we were using and looking at previously. Okay, and I'm going to just take this document, and I'm just going to copy everything. Control A, Control C, sort of stuff users expect to be able to do. I'm returning to SharePoint, again, whichever browser you choose to work in. I'm just going to go Control V. And this is actually going to present me with a menu where I'm going to get some options about how I paste that information into SharePoint. And there you go. I'm presented with three options, and let's briefly just explain them. I think one's fairly self-explanatory, which is paste as text. We sort of all know what that means, so just pasting the text. SharePoint paste is if for any strange reason we want to use the native SharePoint paste experience, but bearing in mind those challenges that this will potentially paste the items across multiple web parts, images will be separated out. It will be very confusing for the user to work with. We also might find that some of the image controls don't paste correctly. What I'm going to use is Paste Plus. And a couple of key points here. Firstly, this is going to paste much quicker than the native SharePoint experience. Working and pasting, I think it was 15, 18 pages, which I've got in my document, but also it's going to paste this into and maintain this in a single control, and it's going to be and correctly store things like my images will go inside of my asset library, and it will not fail to paste any of those images. And it will maintain things like table controls. So I've got a table, it will lay that table out. I haven't had to do anything extra to enable that. It just works the way users expect. I've got links there, which I might need to run SharePoint Find and Replace on. And I've got images included here. If I go ahead and publish those, I'm going to end up with a SharePoint page, which I pasted in a few seconds directly from my document. Of course, it helps if I give my page a name. So let's just call it QuizCom. And there you go, there's my page with all of that content copied across. And if we go and have a look in our site assets library, we'll also find, and we can define in our assets library where all of those images go, but those are stored as images as we'd want them to be, in the same experience as if we had uploaded those images as part of a page authoring process. And so those would go into a specific folder called QuizCom, which would contain all of my files. And that takes us to the end of the demos, which we would go through today. So I just want to talk to you about a couple of final bits before we go on to questions. Firstly, these apps are really easy to install. Now, the SharePoint Find and Replace app is a little bit different because that's a desktop app, but very simple. We all know how to install desktop apps. But all of these other apps are can be installed actually directly now from the QuizCom website. They're easily to store. You provide the SharePoint site URL which you want to install them on. And we'll actually take you through the process in a couple of steps to install the app onto your specific SharePoint site. And you've got considerations as an organization about whether, like all SharePoint apps, whether these are just installed to individual team sites or deployed tenant-wide and accessible to a number of your SharePoint sites. So just to briefly summarize, the solutions I've shown you today are pretty simple. We've covered them in 15 to 20 minutes. They're easy to use. As Sarah said in her introduction, all of the QuizCom apps are designed for non-technical users. Sure, they can be used by complex users, but the majority of users of SharePoint are end users. We want to make it easy for them to use. We also want to make SharePoint work the way users expect. We want to make it easy. We want to make it do what they expect. If I copy and paste from a document, I expect it to just work. If I want to bulk edit a list, I expect it to work like Excel. If I want to set a link in a list, I expect to be able to easily browse and find the resource I want to link to. Now, I've used Office 365 today, but all of these apps work with SharePoint 2019 as well. And I think, as I summarized on the previous slide, these are all simple to install. They're also low-cost, simple apps. Sarah will talk a little bit more potentially about pricing if you've got any questions around that, but all that information is also available on the QuizCom website. And with that,